What's up, girls? I just read Gender Trouble by Judith Butler. It is the probably core tenet book of gender theory, written in like 1990. And very interesting read. I read it as like research for this novel I'm writing that has a female protagonist. And I felt like I was trying to do some research to kind of like, try to ungender my perspective for the sake of the writing, you know? But what I've come to find out is this book is like from something that's actually called second wave feminism, which seems a lot more important for like queer theory than it is for feminist theory. It's kind of hard for me to differentiate, honestly, because I don't have like a lot of experience in it. And this being my first like book that I've read kind of in this sphere, I was a little bit lost. It's super dense and appeals to like the entire Western canon of philosophy, basically. Hegel, Aristotle, etc. All of those kind of classic giants, but then also a ton of like 1950s, like what's called French feminist philosophers, or including Foucault. I guess he's not a feminist philosopher, or I don't know. But Foucault, a girl named Wittig, and one other, Irigiri. Anyway, she's basically responding to a lot of like feminist canon that I hadn't read. So this is a little difficult for me to understand. I think I kind of just, glanced the surface of what she's getting at. The core takeaway from the book is that gender is a practiced construct. Like you practice wearing a dress and it becomes your identity. It's not that you wear a dress because it's your identity to wear a dress. Basically, like she argues that your identity is a lived experience, and we start children with these repetitive acts that build their identities around these things that they may or may not want to embody. Which, I think is probably true. It's an appeal to repetition and forming the self, which I think if you like ever apply that kind of reasoning in like another facet of your life, that's like absolutely true. Like if you go to the gym and lift weights every day, that'll probably become a big part of your identity, and you'll think of yourself as someone who does that. And in response, it creates this like feedback loop. In response to thinking of yourself as someone who does that, you want to do that and be that, and maybe subscribe to some cultural trends of people that do that activity. But it's interesting because there is this, it's like you can't, because the world is so gendered, inherently, it's kind of hard to remove the human experience from that. Aristotle has this concept, I believe, in his either metaphysics or Nicomachean ethics, where he talks about like philosophizing in the theoretical in a vacuum of like what would human nature be like if this hadn't happened and this hadn't happened, is sort of, it can be useless, because like whether you like it or not, you're inheriting the history of all humankind, and all humankind builds the past, builds the present, which builds the future, and you can't really divorce what's happened from what's happening. So that would be like, and she's not trying to do that, I guess. And it's interesting because her critiques of all of these things have clearly made a huge impact. From my understanding, she's one of the seminal figures around, specificity of pronouns and certain things like that. And to hear it within her kind of belief system, of like, you become what you repeatedly do, it makes a lot of sense to have like full autonomy in how you present yourself to others and want to be, spoken to and whatever. And it hovers around a lot of like interesting existential questions, just from like a writer's perspective, about like, what is our identity? Are we the summation of, our actions and what we continuously do and how we talk to ourselves and, the choices we make over time? Is our essence something that's a little harder to grasp than that? Are there these biological imperatives? Are we some combination of all of those things? So those are questions that I really fascinate me and seem to be unanswerable to everybody. But her claim is that like culture should be driven so that people are not pre-gendered, so that they have more autonomy in being themselves, I guess would be the high level one sentence, which I totally get. This was an interesting experience reading this book. For my novel, I guess I just kind of wanted to go into gender theory a little bit because I wanted to like understand the more like lived experience of being a woman and like how it's different from being a man and how people interpret that, et cetera, et cetera. I guess there's more of that in first wave feminism. And so I'm going to look into that, but this was kind of a cool side quest, and it feels like all of the things that we discuss culturally right now really revolve around identity, whether it be the politics involved or, how we view ourselves or like mental health things. A lot of mental health is just like saying, I feel like a lot of mental health practices that you do at home are just like saying positive things about yourself can really alter the way you view yourself, which makes a really compelling case for repetition really influencing your identity. But yeah, I feel like a lot of the big questions we face right now is like, what are we exactly? Which is pretty interesting. And those are themes that I'm interested in and that my books, kind of revolve around. So this was a cool side quest and like really benefited me in some ways that I wouldn't have imagined going into it. So it was cool. That's Gender Theory by Judith Butler. Check it out.